If you had asked Michael 7 years ago what he thought his life would look like at 35, he would have told you about boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, about penthouses with glass walls and city lights that never went out. He would have told you about power, about legacy, about the kind of success that left a mark on the world. He would not have told you about waiting. He would not have told you about Sophia. But life, as Michael learned, is less about the plans you make and more about the moments that break you open and force you to become someone new. It started on a rain-soaked Thursday in late October, the kind of day when the city seemed to sigh under the weight of its own ambition. Michael was late for a meeting, a rare occurrence, but the traffic was relentless and his driver, for once, was silent. He stared out the window, watching the world blur by, and wondered if anyone else felt as restless as he did. The city was a living thing, pulsing with energy, but Michael felt strangely apart from it, as if he were watching his own life from behind glass. He arrived at the Meridian Foundation's annual gala, a charity event he'd sponsored for years but never truly attended. Tonight, though, he needed a distraction. He needed to remember why he'd started building empires in the first place. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and sequined gowns, laughter echoing off marble columns, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and ambition. That's when he saw her. Sophia stood near the far wall, her posture both proud and weary, a glass of water in her hand. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but unadorned, her hair pulled back in a way that revealed the delicate strength of her jaw. She was not mingling, not laughing, not angling for attention. She was simply present, as if she belonged to a different world entirely. Michael was used to being noticed. He was used to people seeking him out, eager for a word, a favor, a connection. But Sophia didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. She watched the crowd with the quiet patience of someone who had learned to expect little and accept less. He found himself moving toward her before he could think better of it. Something about her stillness called to him, a calm in the storm of his own making. "Enjoying the party?" he asked, his voice low, careful not to startle her. She turned, her eyes meeting his with a steadiness that surprised him. "It's beautiful," she said, her tone polite but distant, "but I'm just here for the cause." He smiled, trying to place her. "You work with the foundation?" "I volunteer," she replied. "My son attends the after-school program. They asked me to help with the silent auction." Michael glanced at the table beside her, covered in bid sheets and donated artwork. "That's generous of you." Sophia shrugged. "They've done more for me than I could ever repay." There was something in her voice, a quiet gratitude, but also a hint of exhaustion. Michael recognized it. He'd heard it in his own voice, late at night when the world was asleep and the weight of his choices pressed down on him. He wanted to ask her more, but a board member appeared at his elbow, eager to introduce him to a senator. Michael excused himself, but as he walked away, he glanced back. Sophia had returned to her post, her gaze steady, her presence unshaken. That night, as the gala wound down and the city outside slipped into darkness, Michael found himself thinking about her. He thought about the way she stood apart from the crowd, the way she spoke with quiet conviction, the way she seemed to carry both hope and resignation in equal measure. He didn't know her story, but he wanted to. The next morning, Michael asked his assistant to find out more about the woman from the gala. He expected a name, maybe a brief background. What he got was a file that made him pause. Sophia Bennett, age 31, single mother. Her son, Elijah, was 7 years old. She worked 2 jobs, one as a nurse's aide at St. Mary's Hospital, another as a night cleaner at a downtown office building. No criminal record, no debts, no scandals, just a woman doing her best to survive in a city that rarely noticed people like her. Michael read the file twice. He wondered what it would be like to live a life measured not in millions, but in minutes. Minutes stolen between shifts, minutes spent helping with homework, minutes spent hoping for something better. He thought about reaching out, but something stopped him. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the knowledge that people like him and people like Sophia didn't belong in the same story. But fate, as always, had other plans. A week later, Michael was leaving a late meeting when he saw her again. This time, she was standing in the rain outside St. Mary's, her coat pulled tight around her, her son's small hand in hers. Elijah was laughing, splashing in puddles, his joy undimmed by the weather. Sophia watched him with a tired smile, her eyes soft. Michael hesitated, then approached. "Need a ride?" he asked, nodding toward his car. Sophia looked at him, surprised. "We're fine, thank you." He glanced at Elijah, who was now trying to catch raindrops on his tongue. "It's no trouble, I insist." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right." In the car, Elijah chattered about school and superheroes, his energy filling the space. Sophia was quiet, her hands folded in her lap. "Thank you," she said as they pulled up to a modest apartment building. "You didn't have to." Michael shook his head. "Sometimes it's nice to do something just because you can." She smiled, a real smile this time, and for a moment Michael felt something shift inside him, a door opening, a possibility he hadn't dared to imagine. The days that followed were a blur of meetings and deadlines, but Michael found his thoughts drifting back to Sophia and Elijah more often than he cared to admit. He told himself it was curiosity, a passing interest in a woman whose life was so different from his own. But the truth was more complicated. There was something about Sophia's quiet resilience, the way she moved through the world with dignity despite its indifference, that unsettled him. It made him question the value of everything he'd built. He saw her again the next week, this time at the hospital. Michael was there for a board meetings. Mary's was one of his foundation's biggest beneficiaries. As he walked through the pediatric wing, he caught sight of Sophia in scrubs, her hair tucked under a cap, her face drawn with fatigue. She was reading to a small group of children, her voice gentle, her presence soothing. Elijah sat at her feet, listening with rapt attention. Michael paused in the hallway, watching. He saw the way the children leaned into her words, the way Sophia's eyes softened when she looked at her son. It was a kind of wealth he'd never known, a richness measured not in dollars, but in moments of connection. After the story ended, Sophia gathered the children for a game. Michael slipped away before she could see him, but the image lingered. That night, he found himself staring at the city's skyline from his penthouse, the lights stretching out like a map of all the things he'd achieved. But for the first time, it felt empty. He tried to focus on work, on the deals that needed closing and the projects that demanded his attention. But the more he tried to lose himself in numbers and negotiations, the more he found himself thinking about Sophia. He wondered how she managed, how she balanced 2 jobs, motherhood, and the endless demands of survival. He wondered what it would be like to carry that kind of weight and still find the strength to smile. A week later, Michael attended a fundraiser at the hospital. The event was smaller than the gala, more intimate. He spotted Sophia working the registration table, her smile polite but tired. He waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. "Long night?" he asked, offering her a cup of coffee. She accepted it with a grateful nod. They always are. He leaned against the table, studying her. "You do a lot for this place." Sophia shrugged. "They helped me when I needed it. I'm just giving back." Michael hesitated, then asked, "What about you? Who helps you?" She looked at him, her eyes searching. "I manage. That's what you do when you're a parent. You find a way." He admired her honesty, her refusal to play the victim. "If you ever need anything—" She cut him off gently. "Thank you, but I'm not looking for charity." He nodded, understanding. "Not charity, just kindness." Sophia smiled, a small, sad smile. "Kindness is rare in this city, but I appreciate the offer." They stood in silence for a moment, the noise of the fundraiser fading into the background. Michael wanted to say more, to bridge the gap between their worlds, but he didn't know how. He was a man who solved problems with money, with influence, with power. But Sophia's problems were different. They couldn't be fixed with a check. As the night wore on, Michael found himself watching her from across the room. He saw the way she moved through the crowd, always attentive, always present. He saw the way people responded to her, nurses, doctors, patients, all drawn to her quiet strength. He realized then that he was jealous, not of her struggles, but of her purpose. She lived each day with intention, with love. He, for all his wealth, had spent years chasing things that left him feeling hollow. After the event, Michael offered Sophia a ride home. She hesitated, then accepted. In the car, Elijah fell asleep in the back seat, his head resting on Sophia's shoulder. "Do you ever get tired?" Michael asked quietly. Sophia laughed softly. "All the time, but you keep going. You have to." He glanced at her, admiring the way she carried herself. "You're stronger than you think." She looked at him, her expression serious. "Strength isn't a choice, it's a necessity." They arrived at her building, and Michael walked them to the door. Sophia paused, searching his face. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He hesitated, then answered honestly, "Because I want to. Because I see you." For a moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a possibility. Sophia nodded, then disappeared inside, leaving Michael standing in the rain, wondering when his life had become so complicated. Michael's world was a fortress of glass and steel, but Sophia's was built on faith and routine. Their lives ran parallel, never meant to intersect, yet the city seemed determined to throw them together. Over the next few weeks, Michael found reasons to visit St. Mary's more often. He told himself it was for the foundation, for the children, for the optics. But every time he walked those fluorescent-lit halls, his eyes searched for Sophia. He learned her schedule without meaning to. Mondays and Thursdays, she worked the pediatric wing. Tuesdays and Fridays, she cleaned offices downtown. Wednesdays, she took Elijah to the library after school, and on Sundays, she volunteered at the community kitchen. Michael admired her discipline, the way she carved out time for her son, for others, for herself, even when there was nothing left to give. One evening, as winter crept into the city, Michael found Sophia in the hospital cafeteria, her head bowed over a cup of tea. Elijah sat beside her, coloring quietly. Michael hesitated, then approached, feeling oddly nervous. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Sophia looked up, surprised but not displeased. "Of course." He sat, glancing at Elijah's drawing. "That's impressive. What are you working on?" Elijah grinned. "It's a superhero. He saves people." Michael smiled. "Looks like you've got a real talent." Sophia watched the exchange, her eyes softening. "He gets it from his father." Michael caught the flicker of pain in her voice. "Is he—" She shook her head. "He left before Elijah was born. We haven't seen him since." Michael nodded, understanding more than he let on. "You've done an incredible job." Sophia shrugged, but her cheeks flushed with pride. "We manage." They talked for a while, about nothing and everything. Michael found himself relaxing, the weight of his responsibilities fading in the warmth of their company. He told Elijah about his own childhood, about the books he loved, the games he played. Sophia listened, her laughter lighting up the room. As the evening wore on, Michael realized he didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay in this small, ordinary moment, to be part of something real. After Elijah fell asleep, Sophia gathered her things. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for tonight, for seeing us." Michael hesitated, then reached for her hand. "You deserve to be seen, Sophia. You and Elijah both." She looked at him, her eyes shining. "Most people look right through us." "Not me," he promised. They stood in silence, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Michael wanted to say more, to tell her how much she'd come to mean to him, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently, then let go. That night, Michael lay awake in his penthouse, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Sophia's strength, about Elijah's laughter, about the way he felt when he was with them, grounded, alive, hopeful. He wondered if it was possible to build a life that mattered, not just a legacy that endured. The next morning, Michael made a decision. He called his assistant and cleared his schedule for the afternoon. He drove to Sophia's apartment, his heart pounding with anticipation. She answered the door in jeans and a faded sweatshirt, her hair pulled back, her face free of makeup. She looked tired but beautiful. "Michael?" she asked, surprised. He smiled, suddenly shy. "I was wondering if you'd like to have lunch with me. Just you. No foundation, no hospital, no obligations." Sophia hesitated, then nodded. "Let me get my coat." They walked to a small cafe around the corner, the kind of place Michael hadn't visited in years. The waitress greeted Sophia by name, and Michael realized how different their worlds were. Here, Sophia was known, valued, part of a community. Michael was just another customer. Over sandwiches and coffee, they talked about dreams. Sophia's hope to go back to school, Michael's desire to do something meaningful with his wealth. They laughed about Elijah's superhero obsession, about the city's endless noise, about the absurdity of fate. For the first time in years, Michael felt seen, not as a billionaire, not as a headline, but as a man. After lunch, they walked through the park, the trees bare and the air crisp. Sophia stopped by a playground, watching Elijah climb the jungle gym. "He's my whole world," she said softly. Michael nodded. "I can see that." Sophia turned to him, her expression serious. "Why are you really here, Michael?" He took a deep breath. "Because I want to be. Because I think I'm falling for you." Sophia's eyes widened, surprise and fear mingling in her gaze. "Michael, our lives are so different. He cut her off gently. "You're not just anything. You're extraordinary." She looked away, struggling with emotion. "I've spent 7 years waiting for something to change, for someone to see me. I never thought it would be you." Michael reached for her hand, his voice steady. "Let's stop waiting, Sophia. Let's start living." She smiled through tears, hope flickering in her eyes. For the first time, the future felt possible. Spring arrived in the city with a quiet promise, the kind that slips in unnoticed and changes everything. For Michael and Sophia, it was a season of small beginnings, of cautious hope, of tentative steps toward something neither of them had dared to imagine. They saw each other more often now, sometimes with Elijah, sometimes alone. Each meeting was a lesson in contrast. Michael's world of privilege and power, Sophia's world of struggle and grace. Yet, in the spaces where their lives overlapped, something new was taking root. Michael found himself drawn to the ordinary rhythms of Sophia's life. He learned to appreciate the simple joys, a home-cooked meal, a walk in the park, the sound of Elijah's laughter echoing through a tiny apartment. He discovered that happiness wasn't found in the grand gestures or the glittering parties, but in the quiet moments of connection. Sophia, for her part, learned to trust again. She let Michael into her world, little by little, testing the boundaries of her own vulnerability. She watched the way he treated Elijah, the patience and kindness he showed, and she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have more than survival. But the world is rarely kind to those who hope. One evening, as Michael was leaving Sophia's apartment, he was confronted by a photographer lurking in the shadows. The next morning, his face and Sophia's were splashed across the tabloids. Billionaire's secret romance. Who was the mystery woman? The story was everywhere. Reporters camped outside Sophia's building, neighbors whispered, and Elijah came home from school in tears after classmates teased him about his famous mom. Sophia was furious. "This is why I didn't want this, Michael. I can't protect Elijah from your world." Michael's heart ached at the pain in her voice. "I'm sorry, I never wanted to hurt you." She shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. "You don't get it. I've spent 7 years building a life for us, keeping him safe. I can't let your world destroy that." He reached for her, but she pulled away. "Maybe we're just too different." For days, Michael tried to fix things the only way he knew how. Calls to lawyers, offers of security, promises to make it all go away. But Sophia refused his help. "You can't buy my peace, Michael. You can't buy my son's childhood." He realized then that love wasn't about control. It wasn't about rescuing someone or erasing their struggles. It was about standing beside them, even when you couldn't fix the pain. Michael stepped back, giving Sophia the space she needed. He focused on his foundation, pouring his energy into projects that mattered. But every night he found himself staring at his phone, hoping for a message, a sign that she was ready to let him back in. Sophia, meanwhile, wrestled with her own fears. She missed Michael, missed his laughter, his warmth, the way he made her feel seen. But she was terrified of losing herself, of losing Elijah to a world she didn't understand. She watched her son struggle with the attention, saw the way he clung to her, and wondered if she was being selfish for wanting more. One evening, after Elijah had gone to bed, Sophia sat alone in the quiet apartment, the city lights flickering outside her window. She thought about the years she'd spent waiting for things to get better, for someone to choose her, for a future that felt out of reach. She realized she was tired of waiting. She wanted to live, to love, to believe that happiness was possible. She picked up her phone and dialed Michael's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice breathless with hope. "Michael," she said softly, "I'm scared, but I don't want to be alone anymore. I want you. I want us." He was silent for a moment, then said, "I'll wait as long as you need, Sophia. But I want you to know I love you. I love Elijah. I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like." Tears slipped down Sophia's cheeks, but for the first time, they were tears of relief. "Come over," she whispered. Michael arrived within minutes, and when Sophia opened the door, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he'd never let go. They stood together in the quiet, the city humming around them, and for the first time, Sophia felt truly safe. The weeks that followed were not easy. The media eventually lost interest, but the scars remained. Sophia and Michael learned to navigate their differences, to communicate honestly, to forgive each other's mistakes. Michael introduced Sophia and Elijah to his world slowly: dinners with close friends, quiet weekends at his country house, afternoons spent volunteering together at the foundation. Sophia found her own strength in these new spaces. She spoke at charity events, sharing her story with other single mothers, inspiring them to believe in their own worth. Michael watched her with pride, amazed by her courage, her grace, her ability to turn pain into purpose. Elijah, too, began to thrive. He made new friends, discovered a love for music, and started to believe that he could be both ordinary and extraordinary. He called Michael Dad for the first time on a rainy afternoon in June, and Michael wept, unashamed, at the gift of that word. 7 years of waiting had led them here, not to a fairy tale, but to something real, something earned, something worth fighting for.